Okay, so welcome back to my channel. Okay, this is going to be a quick recap, or as quick as possible recap, of Striking Out Season 2, Episode 1. And so, this episode is basically the aftermath of what happened during the tail end of Season 2. And so, three, big things happened. Tara lost her office space because the person who was renting the space for his coffee shop, he got evicted. Ray went to jail for drug possession, and because he was still on probation, and files that Vincent needed for his case suddenly literally went up in flames. And so it opens with Eric and Tara. They're walking towards the coffee shop, what was the coffee shop, and Pete is kind of cleaning, doing his last minute packing and getting stuff out. Tara's there to get the remainder of her stuff out. And basically, she lets Eric know that she knows that his father, Richard, is behind the eviction. And of course, Eric initially gets defensive and basically like, you prove it. And she was like, well, no, you prove it. You do the research, because we've been trying to figure out who owns the property, but we haven't been able to do that. And so they basically part ways. And poor Pete. Pete has just been smitten with her since the first time she walked in that coffee shop. And so this is basically the end for Tara and what could have been. Right? So, he's helping her load the last few things of her stuff into the van. And he didn't want it to be a goodbye. He still wanted to see her, but she basically had to let him know there's just too much going on right now. I'm not looking to get into a relationship. And she let him down as easy as she could. And so they parted. Well, of course, Pete felt some kind of way. But, they parted ways. And that's pretty much the last time you saw Pete. So Tara's on her way to Ray's hearing. And on the way there, she gets a call from Vincent. And this is where Vincent finds out about the eviction. And so, of course, he's shocked and, can't believe that happened. And he offered to do whatever he can if she needed any help with Ray's case. And so Ray's case he's actually been represented by George, which is played by, my goodness, I can't remember her name, but she was on one of my favorite shows, Tudor. She played Catherine of Aragon. And so she is also Tara, and Tara obviously knows her, and Vincent knows her as well. And so she meets up with her. She goes to George's office to kind of go over, review Ray's case, and try to come up with a strategy. And she, while on her way to meet with George, I think an attorney died or something happened. I'm assuming he died. And so he still had a lot of open cases. And so firms and attorneys are able to buy the cases. And so because she couldn't get there right away, she asked her mom to go ahead of her to find out what cases are there, and to try to get her some cases so she can have some income. And so while her mom is doing that, Tara eventually gets there. She eventually meets up with her mom, and for some reason this is where she sees her name is Julie. I couldn't remember her name before, but she was the attorney that Tara had to meet with to transfer her files. That she was kind of cold and awkward with Tara for some reason. And for whatever reason, Tara thought they were friends when Tara actually worked there. But, So, there was this case that Tara wanted. And her mom is giving her advice. Because her father is actually, I think, a barrister. He works for the courts. And so, her mom is very knowledgeable in that area. And so she was basically helping her trying to decide which cases to buy. And so it was this particular case that it was a family law case. And for some reason, Julie just decided to outbid her for some reason. And it didn't make sense right away. And so she was like, Dunbar doesn't even practice family law. Why is she fighting so hard for this case? But in the end, she ended up spending $18,000 for however many cases, right? And so she was actually pulled to the side by, I don't know who the woman was, but she basically let Tara know that she may be under investigation by the board or whatever governing body they have that handles their licensing or whatever, that she's being under review for hiring a criminal, Ray, to work for her. And so they leave there. They leave there. And one of the cases that Tara picked up was a immigration case. So there's a woman named Promise, and she is being held at a detention center, and she's going to be deported very soon for being obviously coming into the country illegally. And so Tara, went to the detention center to call her. To talk to her to let her know what the process was going to be. And she was very kind of distant and despondent. Like she didn't really say anything. And she basically just asked Tara to leave. Like she just was uninterested. And so what you noticed when Tara arrived, there was this guy who was outside standing by his car, and you saw her Promise. She was standing by the window, so she saw him. So it's like, okay, what is her connection with this guy? And of course, we find out later on that his name is Daniel, and he's actually in love with Promise. But she, given her situation, she knows that she's going to be deported soon, and there's some other stuff in her background that she's not too proud of, and so she's basically shut him out. Like he's been trying to see her, but she just doesn't want to. She just doesn't want to see him, especially given the fact that she knows that she's not going to be able to stay in the country. And so Tara and George meet with Ray for his bail hearing. And so they go in, and basically his bail was denied, and he was sent back to prison. Of course, Tara's trying to reassure him that we're doing everything that we can, and just be patient. We're gonna take care of you. And so Tara eventually meets up with Vincent. I forget where he was, because he's still dealing with the inquiry. So there was news reporters outside. But she, met with him briefly, and he basically offered to help with Ray's appeal. So he saw Eric coming up, and he was like, here comes little boy Fauntleroy or something like that. So he walks away. Eric walks up, and she gives him a copy of the lease, just to help him in his search to trying to find out who owns this property and how would they find out what was going on and to have them evicted. And so Eric gets back to his office, and Lucy, who's the receptionist who actually referred Julie O'Brien in the Bigamy episode, she was the one who referred Julie to Tara. So I'm like, anything to keep Tara and Eric in the same circle with the hopes that some flame will be rekindled and they're going to get back together, but whatever. So she's helping Eric try to find out who owns this property, and then he eventually finds out that he owns the property. The property is actually held in trust, and the trust is managed by his father. So basically, Tara was right that his father was responsible for the eviction. And so and these are not happening. I'm just trying to keep as many things as I can so that as consistent as possible, so we can keep some storylines together. And so we eventually see Meg. She arrives home, and she, is going through her mail, and she sees some cut-off notices. I don't know if that was an eviction notice, whatever the case may be. So her ends are not meeting at this point. And so she turns on the TV, and she sees this news story about the shed being set on fire and the paperwork and all of that. And so she genuinely looked shocked. So I'm taking from that she wasn't actually want to set the fire. I think once she told Richard where the files were, he sent someone to take care of it. But basically, she started in some panic. She, I guess, had some place where she stored her files, and there was a file in there from Dunbar. I don't know if it said Tara in Dunbar or Eric in Dunbar or something like that. And it's like she wanted to make sure she still had it, and then she was kind of searching for something else. It really didn't make sense. And so Meg eventually goes to Dunbar and meet with Richard, and basically she's looking for steady work. She said that her landlord is saying that she needs to have proof of income, and she's basically giving Richard her rates, and he's told her that he had a job for her. And at that point, we don't know what that job is, right? So Tara eventually tells Vincent that Meg is working for Richard, and of course he's like, "Are you serious? Like what the hell is going on?" She accidentally let it slip that she told Meg. Basically, she hired Meg to find the files in the shit, in which and Meg, which led Meg to the shed. They had the files, which was eventually burned down. And so she was like, "Oh shit." So now Vincent's like, "What the hell are you talking about? What?" And so she was basically like, "Oh, I have to go right now." And he's like, "No, Tara, what is going on?" And she was like, "Basically, I need you just please focus on Ray's appeal." And so she left. And so he's standing there like, "Okay, this conversation is far from over." Tara meets with David, who was the guy who was standing outside of the detention center, and he basically explained to Tara how her and Promise met, and how he's been trying to see her for months, but she just hasn't been hasn't had any communication with him, and that he really wants to meet her, and that he's in love with her, and that if she has to leave, then he would be willing to go with her. So Tara eventually goes back to the detention center. She sits down with Promise and have a conversation, and then she finds out the backstory. Basically, Promise was sex trafficked. That's how she got into the country. And so after she left the captor, she was basically was able to work at a gas station. But when it came time for her to produce some documentation, she wasn't able to do that, and that's basically how she got caught and was sent to the detention center to be deported. And so she was basically letting her know that he loves you and that just talk to him. And eventually he was there, but he was further away. And basically Tara gave him the okay, she's ready to sit down and talk to you. And she basically told him, what was going on with her. And after that, they basically decided he decided that he wanted to marry her. Even after knowing everything about her, because that wasn't her fault. She was in a bad situation. Tara then calls Meg and asks Meg to investigate the officers. And of course, Vincent is looking at her like, "Why are you? If you know she can't be trusted, why?" And she was basically like, "I'm doing whatever I'm using everything at my disposal to get Ray off." Meg does the research, and she actually, being the private investigator, she's made connections, and people owe her favors, and so she was able to go to the front desk officer at, I don't know if it was their precinct or at a precinct, someone that owes her a favor, and he was able to determine that arrest wasn't logged, that they weren't officially told to do that. So it was basically a setup. It was a setup, and they had no business being there. So she was able to go back, and she took that information back to Tara. She actually went to George's office, which is now Tara's office. So George agreed to let Tara rent out half this office space. So Meg actually went there to meet Tara. But Vincent and George were there, and she let them know that the officers were acting on their own accord, or they were paid by someone to basically harass Ray and set him up, and to throw him in jail. Again, still at this point, she's unaware that they know of her deceit and treachery, right? Vincent was able to get a new bail hearing for Ray, and he was able to question the officers. And basically, he was able to prove to the courts that Ray was targeted, that those officers were acting on their own accord, that they had no cause to arrest him, to search him, or any of that stuff. And so basically, Ray was eventually given bail and released. And so Vincent actually took him home and basically said, "This is your home now." So he's living with Vincent. Dan and Promise, they meet with the register so they can get married. And the register is basically saying, that's not going to change much. And they basically explain to him that they understand that them getting married is not going to keep her in the country. They are aware of that, but they still wanted to do it. And so he agreed to marry them. Eric eventually confronts his father about the eviction. He basically confirmed that yes, he did cause her eviction, and he was behind the family law cases. So this explained why Julie was there. Basically, it was just anything to stick it to Tara. So even though they don't practice family law, he knew that Tara would be there, and so Julie was there basically just to be contrary. So just to fuck with Tara. So he admitted to everything, and basically was like, "Yeah, I want you and Tara to get back together, and she needs to find out how hard it is out there on your own." So basically, he's fucking with her with the hopes that eventually she's going to come crawling back to Eric. And so Eric is kind of like, he was stunned. He really didn't know what to say at that point. And so next thing you know, Tara attends Promise and Dan's ceremony. And they go through the whole process. It was, a nice little ceremony. But as they were leaving, the police were waiting, and they took her into custody and basically took her from the chapel to the airport. Like, they were about to throw her on a plane at that point to have her deported. And so George calls Tara during this whole situation where they're trying to get her into the car, in the back of the police car, to let her know that a courier just delivered a letter. And it was actually the letter basically giving her a temporary stay in the country. And so Tara had to get this letter, get it to the airport. I mean, it's like they were literally seemed like they were dragging her down the corridor to literally throw her on a plane when Tara got there with the letter. And so she presented the letter, and of course everybody is ecstatic. He's happy that, they're happy that she's able to stay temporarily. Of course, they still have to go through a whole process, but she eventually got to stay for the time being. And so that, things start to quiet down. So Eric it's the end of the workday. Eric asks Lucy if she wants to go out for a drink. And basically Lucy was like, I'm on my way. I'm headed to the airport. I'm going to meet a friend she's going out of town for something, to go to some concert or something. And so you can see a spark between Eric and Lucy. And then you see Tara's father. Tara, they're at church. And then they see Richard, Eric's father, there as well. And so somehow they met in the back. Tara's father, for some reason I can never remember his name. He eventually runs into Richard in the bathroom. And he basically made some comment about, getting older and the prostate, they're basically taking the piss. And he was basically like, something so minor, we need to be careful because something so minor could be deadly or something. And I was like, ooh, did he just threaten Richard's life? I don't know. Like, basically back off my damn daughter or else. And Richard was standing there like, oh, okay, just speechless. Surprisingly, he didn't have that smug look on his face. So the next thing, for some reason, they record some guy arriving at the airport. And that was basically how this episode went off. So, like I said, I'm going to, because this is the more recent season that they have uploaded, I'm going to upload a new episode every week instead of daily. So I'm going to leave this here, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.